Welcome back to Sunday Night in America. Trials are often won or lost before opening statements are even uttered. It's called jury selection. Trump has pleaded not guilty to falsifying business records in connection with payments to Stormy Daniels. He remains presumed innocent, no matter how infrequently you hear that on other networks. The way the jury selection system works is people are asked questions by the judge, the lawyers, or both to determine fitness and fairness. It's an amazing process. If you like small government, what could be smaller than 12 people deciding the fate and freedom of a fellow citizen? But can any politician get a fair trial these days? Are people willing to say, I don't like the defendant, but the government did not meet the burden of persuasion? New York is the beginning. Special counsel Jack Smith then wants the Supreme Court to reject Trump's presidential immunity claim. The court will hear arguments the week of April 22nd, but the D.C. Court of Appeals was unanimous in rejecting an earlier claim. We're joined now by two former prosecutors who switched over to the more lucrative side of life, Katie Cherkasky and Elliot Felig. Welcome to you both. Katie, what kind of jury are you looking for in New York? I mean, jury selection is a misnomer. It's really unselecting or deselecting a jury, but ideally, who would be on your New York jury?
Well, the judge in this case has already said that anybody who self-identifies as somebody that cannot be fair and impartial up front will not even be questioned further. So that will weed out a significant amount of people who are openly partisan, as it were. We want people who are going to be listening to the evidence in this case and understanding the very high burden of proof that the prosecution has here, because this is not an easy case for the prosecution. And people that are not openly political, obviously, is a significant factor here as well. So I believe jury selection is going to take a long time in this case. We'll see if they can get a fair jury.
Yeah, finding 12 people who have not already made up their mind is always a challenge in high-profile cases. Elliot, let's listen to the former president together, and then I'll ask you a question on the other side.
Sounds good.
We'll see how that and the one in New York is totally discredited. Every legal scholar said they have no case. It's a horrible thing, but it's election interference. It's all run by the White House. Every one of the cases that you mentioned, as an example, Fonnie Wade, every single case is being run, civil, criminal. It's election interference. Joe Biden is using this to try and get elected, and it's a shame.
Elliot, I'm a little rusty, but that sounds to me like a jury nullification argument. So is a jury even going to hear allegations of being politically targeted, never done before, they're out to get me? I mean, it's really relevant politically, but will a jury hear any of that?
Almost certainly not. The judge is probably going to limit it simply to whether or not the four corners of the indictment, the actual elements of each and every charge, are proven beyond a reasonable doubt. But going back to the jury thing, I mean, yeah, there's a real risk here. Generally speaking, the likelihood of a conviction is supposed to depend on the strength of the evidence. But in this case, because of the inherent political bias that jurors may bring to it, there's a real chance that the outcome will be driven not by the evidence, but simply by the popularity, or in this case, the unpopularity of the accused.
Katie, presidential immunity. Give me a quick line of demarcation between a private act versus a presidential act, because that case is going to be decided by the Supreme Court. I guess that's the line of demarcation, immunity for presidential acts, but not private or personal acts. I mean, how do you see this matter that's soon to be argued before the high court?
Well, I personally think that it's a very strong case for Donald Trump. I think that the Supreme Court needs to make it very clear where the line in the sand is drawn, and that's not an easy task when you're talking about the executive, who is one person unto an entire branch of government. So how do you draw that line? Where will we stop questioning executive decisions? Because you can get into hypotheticals regarding military operations and decisions that were made that end in death and maybe were negligent at the time. So you really have to have the court weigh in here and be very clear about where they will draw that line, because it totally will debilitate the executive branch if there's not some sort of significant immunity given to the president.
Elliot, the president is presumed innocent no matter how infrequently that is mentioned on other networks. But let's assume, arguendo, he were to be convicted. Is this the kind of case that results in an active prison sentence? I mean, it doesn't seem that way to me. And if you're not going to be sentenced to prison, are you not better off kind of leaving the judge alone rather than picking a public fight with the sentencing judge?
Sure. So here in New York, we rank felonies from A for the most serious to E for the least serious. These are all E felonies, the least serious. None of them carry mandatory jail time. We are talking about a defendant with no criminal record. And if Alvin Bragg holds to his previously stated philosophy, he said in his famous Day One memo that he would only seek prison sentences in the most violent of cases. So I can't conceive of him holding to those principles and then asking for jail if there's a conviction in this case.
It is going to be a fascinating year. I know when we were sitting in con law class as first-year law students, the three of us did not think we would be discussing 4 pending cases against a presidential candidate. But here we are, and I'm glad y'all did well in law school, and y'all can help us understand these issues. Thank you for joining us on a Sunday night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trey.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.